I'm Timmy.
I'm Justin.
I'm Nathan.
And this is Three Old Tech Dudes.
Do you suppose Candace Bergen still has Sprint long distance service?
I'm trying to come up with a comeback for that, and I got nothing.
Hey, who's that guy in the corner?
Oh, I don't know. He looks like he could be your little brother or something.
Right. Funny you should say that. I've often referred to him as the little brother I never wanted.
And I've often been told by lots of people I was never wanted.
Well, this is Ryan, I think.
It's Ryan.
And I invited Ryan along just to have another voice, and why not?
Comedic relief.
Sometimes I don't like his voice. That's why not.
You'll be all right.
Poor Ryan.
Hold on. I got a list here of stuff I don't like about Justin.
Hey, Ryan even has a call that's not even that old. He's one of them daggum new K-Eat people.
That's right. Kilo Echo 9. Boo!
Boo.
It's a good call.
Boo!
I like the call.
BOO. That is a good call.
Ooh. Yeah.
Well, anyway,
If you can't say anything else about Ryan. He's got a cool call.
Yeah.
it's fair.
And I got it in October.
You did.
Oh, hey, that's even better.
Very nice.
What are we talking about in this train wreck?
Well, I thought the subject of this hour must or should or shall be what were early home computers actually useful for? Because all you ever see nowadays is people playing games on them.
I like that one.
Yeah.
Let's do it right now.
Well, I've got an opinion on that.
Let's hear it.
Is it nothing?
No, it's so I think the reason that we see a lot of gaming done on these older systems, what we consider older systems, what we're talking, 70s, 80s, around that era, right?
I'm thinking or 90. Yeah.
80s and 90s, yeah. We were kids then. That's all we wanted them for, was to play games.
Well, yeah.
So I'm sure they were useful to like, probably not our parents, at least not my parents. My parents were not technology driven folk at all. I was raised by boomers. No offense to any boomers who are into tech.
Well, and like, what about homebrew hardware? Okay, you could do hardware control things with them, but now it's just easier with a Raspberry Pi or an Pico or any of those other, when the Parallax Basic stamp came out, that was, I wouldn't say huge, but it was cool to me, building projects that way. And now it's just so much faster and easier to use modern stuff than to dig through the old hardware controls.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But I would say they were useful.
I think they had use.
I think, because so take it back to the basics. If you wanted to type something, your only other means of putting something to type would have been a typewriter. And I've used a mechanical typewriter in my day. I actually learned how to type on an electric typewriter. Like, that's what my school used for keyboarding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Print Shop Pro.
Print Shop Pro, yeah.
Print Shop Pro. Making those huge, long dot matrix banners that span on forever.
Yeah.
I've still got all that.
Yeah.
I remember. Go ahead, Nathan.
So there were uses. I actually did a high school paper in the 80s on my Commodore 128 and printed it out and everything else. And it worked. I had, I can't remember, the Word Star or something like that. It was the early word processor, but it worked.
Star.
And there were several programs that came out in the 80s for office work. The Commodore Plus 4 was supposed to be essentially an office machine. The Plus 4 was a 4 piece of software, as a word processor, spreadsheet, and a few other things, and which was the work. I have one. I need to get it. I have one. Computer Works power supply died because Commodore, and their older power supplies tend to like explode and kill things.
Yeah.
Well, from the standpoint of that, they go high voltage, so they go from 5 to 6 or 7.
So, but I think more of my question here is, we're talking home computers. Let's think about business in the early 80s. This was
Yeah.
still a mainframe and terminal environment in larger businesses. That was well
Mostly,
established
yeah.
by the early 80s. I can see like the Radio Shack Tandy TRS 80 original models being in business, and they were kind of marketed that. I don't see a lot of historical instance of those being actually in businesses. Like you don't see that.
They
you look at
were,
old stuff.
but they were expensive. So
They were expensive, and I think so. In business in the 80s, I think things were more custom. So think cash registers that could send their sales data to a mainframe.
Yeah.
Which was a thing. Then I actually watched if somebody had given someone a little warning.
Well, so
I
what
had
about
just recently watched a documentary on YouTube about that very subject, the POS system and how it evolved and how early on we actually had dumb terminals. It's just nobody really noticed it. I mean, from a customer's perspective and possibly even from a clerk's perspective.
Oh,
yeah.
What about like that TNC that you've got in your basement, Nathan, that runs off of a TRS 80 or something?
We were off in it. It's serial connector. So it's a whole TNC's entire computer.
Or old bulletin board systems.
Yeah.
You know,
it's a Raspberry Pi of its day, essentially.
Yeah.
Which is really funny. But it's I think that was Z80 base. There's another one's like 6802 and there's a 6502 variant. System variants.
But in your day-to-day office, no, I don't think computers were extremely prevalent. One of the guys that I actually used to work with he told me more than once about how they used to have a computer for their office and nobody would use it. So one day he finally, like after it sat for 6 months, unboxed it and put it on his desk. But nobody really wanted anything to do with it.
I think the biggest headache was networking, for the most part, was very rudimentary and very specific to the system. So you couldn't tie a TRS-80 to like a 5150 back in the day, or an IBM PC.
Okay.
But you could tie all the TRS-80s together. They actually came up with their own networking standards and everything else, and it worked. We had that at the high school, and it actually did work.
That's interesting.
You had storage was insanely expensive. So just think of the TRS-80 system. So you could buy a 10 meg hard drive, and I want to say it was like $5,000. And
I think that one I gave you that I got out of that ISP was $5,000 or $6,000 at 10 meg.
Yeah, it's a very interesting one too. It's a very early
networked hard drive
standard system. Yeah, it's kind of an interesting thing. We at the schools we actually did have 2 TRS-80 10 meg drives that were stacked, and those are tied through the TRS-80 networking to all these TRS-80 Model 3s. I think they figured out a way to tie their Tandy 1000s to it. I don't recall if that actually happened or not, but I know like all the TRS-80 Model 3s throughout the building were tied to it, and it did work. And that's where teachers put in grades. So they had a running SIS on that, Student Information System. And it was very homegrown, modified thing, but it worked. But of course, schools didn't have the problem with coming up with a few $1,000s to make this thing function. They could easily do that at the time, and it was, but when you go back to like a smaller office, it's not really feasible. Larger offices definitely had that stuff. I mean, there was no question back in the 60s, you had large offices, had mainframes, had terminals running and all this kind of stuff. And it happened. IBM sold a lot of 360s and 370s and so on.
Yeah, that's interesting. That was kind of something that came to mind, I think, with like, say, your Commodore 64s and other 8-bit line machines. Usually you saw a focus in even their advertising on use this for managing your home budget and things like that. And there were some people that did that. It always seemed like it was more hobby-like than actually useful. Like there are a lot of people that centered their whole life around what they were storing on a 5 1/4 floppy, though I'm sure some did.
Did you guys see that story a while back that came out of the storage place, your junk storage center that still was using a Commodore 64 for their key entry gate access stuff.
I didn't see that, but it's funny you mentioned that because I do have something to share along those lines.
Isn't there a shop somewhere close to Indy doing something like
There
that?
is.
There it is.
Let me zoom in on this. There's a donut shop up near Indianapolis that is using a pair of Commodore 64s for the point of sale and have for decades and still are.
I mean, there's really, as long as you keep the things running, there's not really a reason they couldn't do that.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about viruses for sure.
No, they won't even work on those.
But
I
yeah,
mean-
it's really interesting. And I know because when we went to Indy Classic, there was at least one person from out of town that went out of the way to go visit this place, which is in Plainfield somewhere, maybe, or Danville, near Indy there.
Wasn't it AJ that did that?
I'm not sure.
I don't remember. I thought it was maybe AJ, but
It's been too long. But yeah, and they were still operating as of earlier this year. So yeah, that's pretty wild. So that's an example. They could have been used for point of sale, but this, like so many things we mentioned already, clearly is a custom solution.
Wasn't there some small production Commodore machines that came out with different keyboards that were for point of sale?
yes, the Pet had some of that.
Yeah.
And then there was a C64 Pet version. It was a C64 in an all-in-one unit. And I want to say they had the ability to do various pieces. I mean, Radio Shack, as much as people always call them trash 80s and everything else, honestly really had like everything for that. They had barcode scanners and all that stuff. I even have most of that. They really pushed that technology a lot, but there's absolutely no reason you couldn't do that back in the day with an Atari, like an Atari 800 like that one, or a C64 or...
Well, how new are we talking? Could we throw Amigas into this too with the video toaster? You made me think of that when you're talking about high school stuff.
Yeah, we had a
Yeah,
toaster
that
at school.
definitely fits the bill because Amiga is technically a home computer. So.
And there are cult followings for those things. You can't hardly touch a decent video toaster.
No.
Oh yeah. It's still sad we literally threw the one we had.
It kills me every time I think about that. I love that machine.
That and all the 3/4 inch U-matic tapes and the tape machines we just threw in the trash back in the day. Yeah, it was just like, and now I'm like, oh, I want to go back and smack
That doesn't
myself.
sound like you.
It.
Yeah.
That was the 1990s. Like we were throwing this stuff away essentially in like 98 when it was at that point we're like, well, what's the point of this? We have better.
That's true.
Yeah,
Well,
technology in general is very I think it's the desirability is very U-shaped. At first it's very useful, and then it starts to decline, and then it gets down here to where it's like, this is junk. I need to get rid of this, and then it starts to go back up.
Like 10-year-old Core i5s are right now. So
yeah. Really?
Well, I mean, it's like the first teacher stations that we had in Mass for the schools. I lucked out and we found one that got missed in a closet. So
that's the one you have, yeah.
That's the one I had.
I'm pretty sure
like, they're gonna throw it in a dumpster, and I'm like, well, I'm just staying home.
Pretty sure my teacher stations, the first ones in my school system, were like probably Pentium 133 or somewhere around that era.
Those are Pentium 75s, yeah. First gen Pentium 75s.
I remember in 4th grade we got an Apple II GS in the classroom, and it's 4th grade and my first time seeing a computer ever, really, because I grew up in the sticks of Missouri, and it was, why won't this America Online floppy disk that I got out of the mail not work in this thing?
Yep. Yeah, we actually got a 2GS in one room at my elementary school here locally. I'm going to say I was in 3rd grade. And in 5th grade, a friend of mine and I, we wanted to make a school newspaper, just the two of us. So they let us go type this up on this 2GS and print it out and make some copies. And it kind of came to mind. It's like all these older computers, a lot of them were just niche use. They were basically glorified word processors that you play games on in most cases.
Yep. We had, I'm not even going to say how many, every model of Apple to every variant, all the stuff that went with them, every piece of it.
Yep.
Just pallets of the stuff. It was
that reminded me of an era. Remember when there were dedicated almost appliance word processors.
Oh
Yeah.
Mhm.
Remember
some
seeing
of them are
those
full-blown
lined up in
computers.
Walmart?
Yeah.
Yeah, there was some of the some of the early brother ones, like, or I'll say
Yep.
early, like early 90s brother ones, were full-blown computers that actually had like the ability to really do a lot more, and they'd like squeeze it down into just
would-
being a typewriter.
Mm-hmm.
And a
Yep.
screen that big on it.
Yeah. I remember.
Even though it
seeing
had
those.
like a video chip, and the thing would actually
Mhm.
do like graphics and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, you had like electric typewriters, then word processors, and then
Yep.
computers. That's kind of
Yeah.
the way it was for a while.
Yep. Yeah. I think we still
Yeah.
have. I think my sister still has hers,
Is that right?
which is one that was, if you opened it up, had like a full-blown, like, I can't remember if it was a Z80 or if it was like an 8088 running in it. It's like, okay, that's a little more than just a typewriter, but that's all it did was typewriters. It just also had like spell check. And
Well, we haven't gone that far from that because they're still selling niche e-paper, typewriter, keyboard things for writers that want no distractions.
yep.
So I mean, we're still
yeah.
doing that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
And there's probably some logic to some of that. I mean, especially a market for it. If there's a market, might as well do it. I mean,
Yep.
But
You know,
it's-
the new cool thing is to ditch your smartphone and get a flip phone.
My mom did that.
Really?
Yeah.
I need my.
But I can't get
iPhone.
Marketplace on a flip phone.
That's, yeah,
No.
that's just it.
That's
my
part of the
mom was
idea.
like, it's too
It
distracting. All I
might
do is
save
look
me
at
more
this.
money.
Well,
If I didn't
yeah.
have Marketplace, I might save lots of money.
I've
Well-
watched several YouTube videos of people doing that. It's interesting anyway.
Yeah.
I know that's a thing, and I
Uh,
see why people would want to do that, especially if they don't want to have to pay for certain things or something. Or
it's more
or
the
don't want
social
distraction.
distraction of it.
Hold on. Let me dig out my tinfoil hat so the government can't spy on me.
Yeah.
There we go.
We all know where you work. They know who you are.
I think that
I'm on every list. I'm on every
it's
list.
more just the distraction factor. You know, the whole. You know, you
Distraction. Who's being a distraction?
any moment of idle time is spent checking some variant of social media.
See, I don't. I'm
What
weird.
do
I
these
don't
people do when they have to go to the bathroom? I
They
mean,
take their phone with them.
do they take
Like,
the shampoo bottle with them to work to read something in the back of the bathroom?
Oh, you mean the people that are doing the flip phone thing? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Revert to whatever they did in the past.
The OG.
Half the stuff I send you guys on Marketplace comes from the John.
Oh, I'm
Exactly what I wanted to know.
That's all right. A lot
You're
of the stuff
welcome.
a lot of the
Great.
stuff you send me is red on the John. So
Yeah, that's so common. I'm like a weirdo, and I don't take my phone to the restroom usually. But
that is kind of
What?
strange.
Nathan's weird? Is this news to you guys? Because
Weird is how we started this channel. I mean, that's, what
true.
that's the whole reason it's
Yeah.
here.
There's also a market for the OG iPods.
yeah.
That's a
I
weird
still
thing.
have my first iPod Touch, which is like
Of course, we're talking about a
second
world
gen.
where a clean Walkman sells for $100 on eBay.
That's
so.
true.
I'm
I
not
still
kidding.
have my original iPod. I don't know what gen it was. It still had the little spinning, touchy wheel.
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I had a fourth gen that the hard drive finally died in it, so I put a compact flash drive adapter in it.
oh yeah, there are whole
Um,
conversion kits
Oh,
yeah.
you can
That's
get.
kind of cool.
Yeah.
And I think it's still up in the loft over my office in my garage in crap that I have never unpacked from when I cleaned my desk out at URS when I left.
Mm.
I got boxes like that, desk boxes, I call them.
Yeah.
Never to be looked in again.
Oh yeah, I still have. How many boxes did we bring in that one day when the lady dropped that stuff off? It was
I don't know. I
probably-
was jealous of about half those. So.
It was like 20 boxes of stuff. I mean, it was thousands of floppy disks. Thousands.
Now
Literally.
you got to back them all up and put them on the Internet Archive so other people can look at your useless
There might be
junk.
something rare in there.
There-
Yeah.
Well, there's like every piece of software from essentially the late 80s on.
Yeah.
Like all the stuff you like, every version of Print Shop, there's Photoshop, there's Office, I mean, it's ridiculous. I'm like,
That's
I'm not
Sure,
sure
that's
that would be
doing all this
something fun. We should arrange for us to use the first version of Photoshop.
oh,
and
that's a great idea.
and then
I
Experience.
haven't I have a version of Photoshop on floppy, I believe, and I've also got Office on floppy and Windows 95 on floppy.
I don't think Office would annoy me. I think Photoshop would frustrate me
No.
very quickly.
It's
Right.
like a
First version.
CS1.
I've become very accustomed to all the toys that Photoshop allows you.
It was like Macromedia Photoshop, wasn't it? I think originally.
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe.
So
I'll
I've
have to
got
go look at it later.
some of that's from back then. I know I have bits and pieces that were Macromedia back then.
I used to have an install for the version of the Office suite before it was packaged together as Office
Yeah.
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
had like Excel and Word and some other odds and ends. It was pretty well as capable as, say, Office 97, which was the first really tight package.
So-
Office 95 was around before that.
4.3 was the first one I ever used.
Yeah, that's one I think.
And it came with everything.
Mm-hmm.
I still have that.
Oh, well.
I still have a complete installer and everything. It would still work too. It'd be
Yeah.
absolutely useless, but it would still work. It also had the weird glitch if you went down in Excel to like row 16,000 whatever it was and go over like 8 pages to like
No.
quad A 3, they've like, and then he typed in a number there and it went to a game.
Mm-hmm. Well, I remember reading about that.
It
So
did
I
it, too.
guess
I tried it.
I guess the point of our subject, were these early computers useful, or were they, and this is kind of where I got the idea, I didn't say this up front, is I've heard it said more than once that home computers of the early 80s especially, but the 80s in general, were machines looking for a purpose. They weren't purpose built. They were built to sell computers. They weren't
Yeah.
built to be
Yeah.
useful.
I would say that's very fair.
So I would say, generally speaking, they had a purpose beyond the fact that gaming is actually a purpose and to sell a.
Well, they had a purpose. Is it a useful purpose? I guess.
Well,
would be
you
Right.
you justified buying the gaming machine for business purposes, keeping account of your checkbook, making
Yeah.
spreadsheet, that the business purpose was there to justify you getting to spend $400 to $500 in the 80s on something
Yeah.
that you were just going to play with.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
That was a big play in what, they talk about the video game crash of 83. What it really was a bad market it was a glut market for software is what it actually was. People were still buying machines,
oh yeah,
but it was easier to say, well, we could buy this Commodore 64, which had been rushed all the way down to like $300 or less, or we could buy an Atari console for $200 and it only plays games, but your kid can supposedly do homework on this, if you buy software and or learn basic. That's the part they always leave out. But
yeah, the thing that really started to come about in the mid 80s was the fact that you couldn't take a disc from a C64 and plug it into an Apple.
It's a Wild West. Yeah.
That by essentially I want to say, and Bill Hurd talks about this when he was finishing designing his, I think the TED system, so the +4 C16, to where people are complaining, I have to completely throw away all my code because none of it works. Is this, and that was becoming a real issue, is that you couldn't buy Microsoft Office and work on, all these systems that were out there, except for the IBM PC clones that were starting to come about.
Yeah.
And becoming very much more popular. I think that's really what spurred business use more than anything else, was standardized architecture.
Microsoft got it right when they started pulling things together, which of course we know in the 90s led to the big antitrust lawsuits when they put web browsers in Windows 95 and the like. And 98 in particular.
I thought that was 98.
Yeah, it was 98 because they rolled it together as part of the OS tightly.
Yeah, it was part of File Explorer.
Yeah, and it's not even like that today. But what they did was they were selling computers that you didn't have to buy software for. You could buy a nice PC for a couple $1,000s in 1996, and it came with basically everything you needed to use a computer.
Yeah.
So,
you could get everything you needed relatively easily.
Which that was missing in the 80s. Go ahead, right?
Yes.
Isn't that how BOS found a niche market? BOS was sold as an alternative or basically given away to OEMs to let them have some kind of OS that was not Microsoft on their PC compatible systems.
Was that like became OS2 or something like that? I think.
No, OS2 was an IBM thing, but BOS was its
Was it?
own thing.
Okay.
But I believe at one time it was fairly Microsoft compatible, which is where the lawsuits. I watched something the other day on it. It was really cool.
Yeah.
But they're still developing BOS. I think it's at like version 9 now. You can still download it and run it, and there's a ton of built-in. I hate for the word apps, but apps and features and programs and stuff. So it's fairly useful.
I know that OS2 is a big. I remember being OS2 being a big competitor.
Right, and I think that was started off of was built off of DOS when Windows was off of DOS, and
OS2 was built as a completely separate 32-bit kernel system, and Microsoft helped co-develop it. We should do an episode on that sometime because I actually know a lot about OS2. So
the Clone Wars.
There was a partnership and there was license compatibility with OS2 until 1993. And then Microsoft went off and said, because Windows NT was based on the technology in OS2.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, in that way, it kind of lives on the multitasking ability. It had DOS emulators in it and the like. Well, maybe it's not the right word. But yeah, we'll do an episode on OS2 one of these days.
Right.
Because I would love to, actually. But
there's so much nerddom that you can hardly keep track of it all.
Yeah, and kind of where we're heading here is that the computers of the 80s weren't that useful, but they did begin to open the door to the computers that were a decade later, I think. Justin was about to say something earlier. I don't know if he still has it in his head.
No, I don't.
I think so.
I think games were from a home standpoint, games were the beginning. But and considering that an office of any size was going to use PDP-11, System 360, or some larger system,
Wang,
whatever. There's a lot of different stuff out there, anyway. Yeah. But being like this thing, like an Atari 800, say 800 XL playing Joust, that was just a game being played on that system, but that system actually could do more stuff. But they sold those systems primarily for games.
Oh, yeah.
Even though they said, you could do more stuff with it. Yes, everyone always knew that 99% of its use was games. But, the clones for IBM also had the same thing. They were selling games. A lot of games. Now, they started shortly after that, but I think the game experience put money into the systems for them to grow to become better office products and stuff like this. I mean, it's just, even today, games outsell office suites by what? Just probably monetarily 10,000 to 1.
Really? I didn't know that.
I don't know.
Well, everybody has an office suite in the business, but everybody at home has multiple games.
Yeah.
I have one office license, but then I have all these other games. So that's the pile up on that.
Yeah. And then, and then then that, forked into open source and everything else. But it's one of those that I think gaming pushed the technology to be more fundamentally usable for office suites and stuff like that, and for just productivity suites in going down in future times. So that's just my particular take on it. I mean, it's just from the standpoint of seeing it when I was a kid, like, this thing, like TRS-80s definitely pushed it to being like, our stuff works in an office, and they sold all the stuff to make work. Honestly, their business model for that was essentially like IBM's. IBM will sell you the system and all the software. And it worked. So did Radio Shacks.
Well, what about how the ability to play games, to program games, to build your own things with BASIC or, heaven forbid, assembler, drove you to create and to do more, and it put that drive in you to create something new, to learn how this hardware worked, to make it do something actually useful. But all that started because of a game, or wanting to type your game out of a magazine into your computer and play it.
Yeah, or all the books that came with every pick a brand, piece of book came with all of them that showed you, like, here's how to build your own games. Here's still all this kind of stuff. And I mean, I have all the TRS-80 books. I have most of the Commodore books. Tim's got the better Commodore book, but the all that stuff. But like, as much as they show you how to do stuff, they don't really show you how to do anything office wise.
Mhm.
But they do show you how to make games.
Well, how much of any new technology like that is really useful other than capturing the imagination?
Oh, that's a good point.
Yep.
You
Well,
know, it's
just
the
after-
cutting edge. It's right there. It's the new. It's the first to get you excited, to get you moving,
teaches
and then
you
you've got to figure out what to do with it from there.
or at least get you comfortable with the product.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So that was going to be my point. Is all of us kind of grew up in the home gaming era, and think of I know my parents were not. I mean they can kind of tread water now on in tech, but none of I don't think any of our parents would have been considered like super users. Let's go with that.
I know.
Right. Yeah.
So, but they didn't grow up with that. We
No.
kind of did. So we got used to, even if you didn't create your own games and all you did was play marketed games, it was still, you had to install the game, you had to launch the game. It got you used to using a computer.
I do remember, and I'm sure I've mentioned this on episodes in the past. The first computer I ever used was a Radio Shack TRS-80 color computer in my elementary school, and we were just playing games. They would say, "These are the discs. This is the thing you type in to run the game," right? And I did run across one of the programming books and wrote I remember it was a for loop program. I copied out of the book that counted, 1 to 100 down the screen, and I modified it to 100,000 and showed some teacher, and they thought I was a genius. It's like it was in the book.
Hey,
That's
you are.
pretty obvious. But from that point on, I didn't have a home computer until many years after that, and it was a PC. But from that point, I was curious. How do I make this? How would you program a game? How did they do this? And I've never quit being curious about that. To Ryan's point there, and Justin's point, kind of became a super user, like so many of us, if not more. All of us on this episode for sure.
Yeah. I kind of laughed. My mom, who passed away a few years ago, but mom's first computer, she was born in 42, and her first computer was in the 90s, but her first computer program was in the 60s.
Oh, that's interesting.
So she was in college and had to write a program in punch cards, take the box of, she's like a shoebox full of punch cards down to the computer lab. You hand it to the guy. He then runs it and gives you the printout from the end. Like, she never got to actually touch the computer because it's this magical thing in this room.
Right. Like when you had computer operators, that was like a role.
Oh yeah. But she actually did write a program back in the 60s. I don't think it was a particularly big program, but it would have definitely been an assembler. It was
Punch cards were.
Oh yeah.
When I did the digital technology merit badge at the high school for the scouts, I tried to, show them a punch card and took and converted how many punch cards it would take to store a, 512 gig of data that's on your nice iPhone, and just the massive warehouses that it would take to store all these cards. And just tried to blow their mind with it. And the fact that you could buy an iPhone for everybody in Indiana and Kentucky for the cost that it took to build the ENIAC.
Yeah.
Right.
So
that's awesome.
Yeah. First time I was teaching a computer course, I told the kids that we brought up the game on a Commodore 64 emulator, but it was Impossible Mission. And I love the game. It's a great game. But I asked the kids, I said, thinking about what you know on how to program now, how big do you think this game, how small can you get this game if you're going to make it? And they ranged wildly from about 100 meg down to, one kid said, I could probably get that in I bet I could get that down to 5 or 6 meg. I bet I could do that. So I stopped the game and showed them the file. It was 170K.
Right.
And they're like, that has voice. It spoke. How would you do that? And I'm like, it's in assembly.
Yep.
This game runs in assembly. Everything is compressed dramatically.
Just telling chips what to do.
And you're just like, the only thing, it's a lot of the repetition. And so, like, bars, you only make it one bar this way, one bar this way, and that's all of it. For the grid layouts of the room and everything else, and a lot of it's repetitive.
There's a really cool video on YouTube that talks about all the cheats and tricks they would do to program the Atari.
Oh yeah,
and racing the beam,
Yep.
Yeah, and doing all the other stuff that they would do to.
Oh yeah.
Because what was the Atari cartridge like? 4K or 15K, something like that.
2K and 4K were the original specs.
Okay,
They wanted to bank switch it with 8K.
I think later you could get them to 8. Now there's technically no reason you couldn't make it.
The first 8K was Asteroid.
Yeah,
the first 8K cartridge was Asteroids.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I'm good.
Yeah. By the end, they could do 32 and 64K cartridges with bank switching, and in addition,
I want to say this one actually that's like a higher one.
It's 8 or 16 at most.
I bet that's an 8. I have to look it up.
Yeah.
Well, now that I've derailed us for a while,
it's all right.
Yeah.
It happens.
Raiders.
Yep. But yes, the base fact that you could do a lot with a little of the older the hardware, especially.
Oh yeah.
Well, and I think that's half the fun of it. What's a modern Call of Duty update? Like 100 gigabytes?
Oh yeah. They can be real sloppy. So
yeah. You had to work the system. You had to figure out ins and outs. It made you a better programmer, a better engineer, a better designer, because you had these minuscule limitations you had to deal with.
Yep. You didn't have like endless size, which is kind of where they're at right now. These
many games were limited by the size available.
Oh yeah,
that was known at the front.
Yeah, the guys playing around with like these computers and the Ataris and such like that for like now trying to make newer games even more complicated and everything else are really coming up with some really nifty ways to get things to actually work that were kind of just dreams back then, but technically it would have worked, just no one dreamed it up. So
there are some Atari 2600 homebrews out there that use special boards that add an ARM processor and the like, and those can turn very impressive very quickly.
Yeah.
Still limited by the look, but they can make a much more deep and complex game than ever was possible in the heyday. So. Well, anyway, guys, it's a good discussion. I think we'll wrap her up unless anybody has any final thoughts. I think we've agreed that they were useful, but you kind of had to have an intention. They didn't just come out of the box useful.
Yeah.
They're like me. They're useful, sort of.
Yeah.
That's right.
Trish keeps you around.
Sort of. That's my verdict. Hey. Till next time, I guess. I'm Timmy.
I'm Justin.
I'm Nathan. And he's Ryan.
Do I get to say I'm Ryan now?
Say it.
I'm Ryan.
And this is 3 Old Tech Dudes +1. Catch you later.
Later.
Thanks for hanging out with us here on 3 Old Tech Dudes. Please subscribe to us here on YouTube for more tech old and new, tinkering at the workbench, repairs, ham radio, electronics, computers, and more. Please like this video and share 3OTD with your friends to help us grow the channel. We tweet at 3 Old Tech Dudes 1 on Twitter, and you can keep up with us on Facebook. Just search for 3OTD and look for our logo. Thanks so much for watching.